All right, I think it's on. How y'all doing? My No More People Pleasing family. Have y'all been doing all right today? I hope you've been having a great day. Um, it's the day has been going good for me, but I'm excited to be able to talk to you all about a subject that again I think is important. What I try to do is bring some of the topics that um I'm talking to clients about and things that are common to many women, and that's pretty much what I specialize in. I see men as well, but uh, you know, eh, eh, topics that are relevant, right? And that's what we're talking about. And one topic that I think it just keeps coming up over and over again is many people want to know how to stop feeling guilty about other people's problems. How to stop feeling guilty about other people's problems. Why is it that this is your situation and you're not doing a whole lot to fix it, but then I'm feeling responsible for trying to navigate and support you through something that maybe you should be taking more of an effort to correct on yourself. What is it that often compels us to get caught up with trying to fix other people's problems with considering other people don't necessarily want to make the effort to do it on their own. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Um, we're going to talk about when I'm trying to help somebody else with their problems, it doesn't seem like things are working out. What are my intentions? What are your intentions? That's something I want you to think about for a moment. When you're thinking about the situation that you've been navigating through. Um, Somebody's dissatisfied with what you're doing to help them. What are your intentions? Have your intentions been good? Have you not done the best that you could in this particular situation to help them out? This is the thing. If you understand and believe that your intentions are good and that you made your best efforts to support, why is that not enough? I want you to write that down. I want you to think about that. Why is that not enough? Right? What what's what and what would be enough? So, and that's the question. What would be enough? Because it seems as though I'm relinquishing my feelings and my satisfaction and handing it over to you, expecting that you at some point are going to say, "Good job. Job well done." At some point, that you are going to accept me. At some point, you're going to gratify me. At some point, you're going to see me as an equal partner or equal friend or equal loved one. At some point, if I keep on doing, and so this is a lot of times the dilemma that we fall into when we're in the people pleasing cycle. So I want to talk a little bit about how to stop that guilt. But there are about four things that I want to kind of leverage on. And one thing is, in order to feel guilt, we must first feel some of these things that I'm going to name. And I want you to be thinking about which one is relative to you. Which one can you identify with? Okay? Um so in order to feel guilt, I first must feel that the person that I'm dealing with, that their expectations and standards are valid. Are their expectations, what they're asking of me, is that valid? Have I taken the time to question that? When the expectations are overwhelming, or when I'm being demeaned or spoken to rudely, or when someone seems frustrated that I have not met their expectations, they seem ungrateful for my efforts. Are their expectations or standards valid? What do you feel in your body when this is happening? Is your body telling you that this person is safe? So we have to evaluate if the expectations and standards that others are that we're allowing them to set for us are valid. But even more so, we have got to start beginning to set expectations and standards for ourselves that don't even involve anybody else. So that's number one. And the number two is, am I responsible for their emotional state? How many of you all out there have been in situations or currently in situations to where you feel like that you're responsible for the emotional state of an adult? You're feeling like that you're responsible for their emotional state. Um, why is that so? Why is that so? Why am I responsible for this adult? And my thing is, unless unless you handling a baby, um, you're not responsible for the emotional state of an adult. You're not responsible for the emotional state of someone who can move and navigate for themselves. What is it that's convincing me that I'm responsible for your emotional state? And so we've got to make sure we're not internalizing the idea that we are responsible. Um, and we have to understand that um that we have to believe you have to believe that your actions have directly are not directly harming someone if they're not initiating things on their own, if they're not making an effort to correct, if they're not being accountable. Okay. If they're not being accountable on their own, I'm not responsible for your emotional state. There is nothing that I can do to secure your emotional state, and you're not a baby. Okay. You that's something that you may need to go see a therapist for. I can't secure your emotional state. I can be here to help and support you, but your emotional state is left up to you. And so I think this is a problem that a lot of times we are choosing, consistently choosing individuals in our lives that are so fractured, and we're coming to rescue them. Are we noticing that there's so many, the people that's closest to me are very broken people, and I happen to be the one that's supporting their emotional state? Okay, more than what they are making an effort to support their own. So once we have that change, I talk about this all the time. Once we have that change and there's repair within ourselves, then we will start attracting something different. But we've got to ask ourselves these questions. Okay, so number three, have I failed in some way? So a lot of times guilt rises up when we think that we've done something wrong. So I'm feeling guilty about your problems, about your lack of initiating something, about you not working when you need to work. I'm feeling guilt. I'm taking on the load of that because they're going to allow me to do that. But at some point I've got to establish that boundary. And so guilt rises when we think that we have done something wrong. Um why are we feeling like failures due to others' actions? Okay. Or if I don't do what you say, why is it making me feel like I'm failing you? Why is it making me feel like I'm failing you just because um like I'm being a bad girl, or when I don't meet your expectations? Um Let me ask you this again. We got to look at the pattern of these relationships to see if it's working out that sometimes I'm being successful meeting unappreciative people's expectations. Usually that's not the case. So we've got to question about why we're feeling like a failure, because or like we failed somebody, because usually this is a default and it didn't start with them. So we don't want to blame them, but we don't want to let them off the hook either. At some point, when things happen in my life, it's been too common that I may sometimes feel like I'm failing someone. I'm letting you down. Okay. Like I'm a bad person because I didn't do something this way, or I didn't meet your expectation, or I'm selfish because for once in my life I said no. Some of us can't even get that out of our mouths, right? Um, I, I'm responsible for you. I should have done such and such and such, right? And so we want to kind of get out of that mode and start asking questions and setting realistic expectations for the type of people that we're attracting, because there are others out there that don't have this expectation that will reciprocate what you put out. Okay. And then the last one is their opinion or judgment matters more. Is their opinion or judgment mattering more than my own? Are you believing that individuals that you are with, that their opinions, that they matter more than what your opinion is? And we have to keep asking ourselves, why is this? Okay. What have they done based on their actions, based on who they are, based on their level of kindness or affection or lack of? Um, how is it that, and I was just recently talking to somebody because, and we were talking about abuse, and a person had been sexually abused, and now they're an adult, and they have never until recently spoken to someone about the sexual abuse, right? Because they have been conditioned to think in the fear of what they was exposed to being a child, fearful that if I say something, then this might happen, right? Okay. So it's the same way sometimes with the way that we develop our idea of our own opinions. When we were a child, when we were in these environments, when there we were in the environment of abuse, right? Then many times uh we will take on the belief system of those who are in charge, and they may have had us to believe that, you know what, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong. Okay. They have us believing that. And so a lot of times we just don't shake that as adults, not realizing that we're free to do on our own. We don't have somebody controlling us. Deb, what's going on, Deb? Deb said, my best only enough, is only enough, but with some people, it is more than enough. It isn't selfish to pull back from people who don't appreciate my value. And Deb, some of us have the hardest time making that move to pull back when someone doesn't appreciate, because we default to believing that we're doing something wrong, or that they're going to leave us. They're going to leave us. Um, but then sometimes we have to evaluate, what purposes have they been serving in my life. A lot of times these are not individuals that have been reciprocating, that have been holding me to the same level as them. In other words, it's like these individuals, when I'm talking about things being even, it's like they have an aura of superiority above us. And maybe that's why we look at their opinions and their judgments as being something better than ours. So we do have to make that step. We have to draw the line. Okay. So I want y'all to be honest. I just named a few things, right? Um, you know, in order to feel guilt, and this is what we're talking about, we must first feel either that their expectation or standards are valid, that I'm responsible for their emotional state, that I have failed in some way, or that their opinion or judgment matters more than mine. Um, which one of those resonates with you when you think about these different things? You know, somebody might say, "Hey, I can identify with all of them." All right. So what we want to talk about is ways to avoid feeling guilty. All right. How do I avoid feeling guilty about other people's problems? How do I avoid feeling guilty about saying no? And this is a tough one, right? And this is kind of what I'm talking about, right? So you have got to be to the point at this point, and this is a tough one, all right, where I'm okay with people not being happy with me. That can be tough. Are you okay with people not being happy with you, particularly when you're standing up for something for yourself, when you're standing up for you, when you're protecting you? Okay. Um, are you comfortable with people not being happy with you? And the thing is that you don't. you need to develop something to be more comfortable with it. But then if you can't get comfortable with it, then you need to dismiss it. Okay. These people, well, we can't dismiss everybody, but for the people that we can, we need to dismiss it, or we need to allow for ourselves to withdraw to an extent emotionally, because it's not safe to place all our trust in surrendering it to these people, right? When someone is not happy with my no or my decision, sometimes it can make me feel like that I'm setting myself up for rejection. I want you to think about what is being triggered when you feel like you are experiencing rejection. What is being triggered when you think to say no? What are some of the things that are kind of going on in your mind that create that resistance from you making that move? When we sort through some of the things that I mentioned above, this is going to help you to be confident with saying no, because now we're kind of using not just the emotional part, but we're also using the thinking part, which sometimes has been cut off, especially if we experience trauma. All right. So what we want to do is experiment. I like to do experiments, and I talk about this all the time. This is just another experiment with evaluating situations to where I'm stepping up to the table. Somebody comes up to me with something, okay, and I say no, okay, and I evaluate my mood, my feeling, the fear. And this it's a good idea while you're doing these experiments to go and journal. Journal the emotions that you're experiencing, journal the fear, and journal also the outcome, because the reality is a lot of times when we start standing up for ourselves, we are surprised. We'll be very surprised at the outcome, the immediate response of some of those who we end up saying no to. Sometimes it's not as bad as we think it is. Sometimes it is. But the thing is, you're empowering yourself, and that's going to pay off in the end. Okay. So we want to examine the source of the guilt. Like, so when you start to feel these guilt emotions about standing your ground, about saying no, I want you to ask yourself the question, why do I feel guilty? We want to constantly ask ourselves questions. And is it justified or is it imposed on by someone else? We've got to find out where this is coming from. Because sometimes it's actually not even coming from them. Because it doesn't matter who comes into my life. I pretty much treat everybody the same way because I'm trying to win everybody over. So sometimes it's more internal, but sometimes it's also manipulated by the individuals who we are involved with. So they're making us to believe that certain things are going on that's not there, right? And so that's something that we want to evaluate as well. Okay, so instead of focusing on what is this is one I want. So instead of focusing on what's wrong about your decision, how much are we focusing on what's right? And I'm going to be honest with you, in making these moves initially, you may not immediately feel in your body the relief and connectedness with feeling like I'm not bad or I'm not being selfish. You may be able to rationalize that in your head, and you might say, I know this is right, but I just keep doing, but you may not feel it in your body. Sometimes it takes time and repetition for us to be able to move from the cerebral into the emotional. Okay. So that's going to come over time. And over time, as you start getting these wins, as you start to now no longer feel the fatigue of the people pleasing situation, then you will start appreciating the effects that you're experiencing. So you want to examine the source of your guilt. Is it justified? Is it imposed? Is it something that someone's manipulating? Am I being manipulated, or have I just been conditioned to guilt? Ooh, conditioned to guilt. Who did that to you? Who did the conditioning? Right? Okay. So because sometimes we go back, and of course this has been happening for a while. Instead of focusing, and then we said of course, instead of focusing on what's wrong, we want to focus on what's right. Um, Affirmations. Some of us are not affirming ourselves, so we don't stand by what we believe, because we don't believe it internally. It's still here, but it's not here. Right. And so we have to continuously provide the affirmations. And again, this is the thing when we're focusing on what is, instead of focusing on what's wrong, but focusing more on what's right, I want you to take the time to journal this each situation. All right. Because it's our default to start thinking about what I'm doing something that's bad, or here I go being selfish, or maybe I shouldn't make this a big deal. Maybe I should just do it when I'm being asked to do. But I want you to not focus on that. I want you for a moment to focus on what in your gut is telling you that is right about this. And I want you to start journaling just so you can keep it up, because sometimes it's good to get stuff outside of our head and put it on paper so that we can make that thing real. It's something about journaling. Okay. And I want you to understand this, and I'm gonna end here, that exposures, constant exposures, okay, um they it creates a situation to make saying no, make creating boundaries, make allowing people to be accountable for themselves. It makes it easier over time. We call it in therapy, we call it, like, we do exposure therapy, because we'll put you in the place, in the presence of the thing that you're having anxiety and fear about, and we'll work it down. And we do some of these methods similar in coaching as well. But exposing decreases the resistance. I'm resisting standing up for myself. I'm resisting making that change. Um, but what you're doing right now is not making you feel good. Okay. What you're doing when you make the change, it may not make you feel good immediately. But let me tell you, over time, matter of fact, you might feel terrible at first because you haven't gotten acclimated to speaking up for yourself. Right. But over time, like I said, the fatigue of not being a yes woman diminishes. After the fatigue of being a yes man, after the fatigue of being a yes woman diminishes, okay, and you start to now feel strong because you're setting boundaries, you're doing the things that you want, and things are opening up in your brain, because a lot of times when we're in this mode, we have shut off a part of our brain that's creative. We've shut off a part of our brain that makes us feel confident. We should. I'm sad to say I have seen situations, boy, God forbid for anybody, but to where, I'm not even going to speak in extreme, but when someone that you're with has stepped away for whatever reason, sometimes you just need to be by yourself for a while. Okay? Because sometimes when we're by ourselves, we become more confident because we don't have, I don't want to call him a devil, but we don't have that inspiration of from the devil, from other people speaking into our ear. Okay, so then we could just deal with ourselves and what we have been telling ourselves that's not positive, and that's a lot easier to control. So you'll build up the confidence, you'll build up the ability to change, but you've got to take these steps. And what are the steps? You've got to be okay with not you've got to be okay with people not being happy with you. We got to develop that, okay? We've got to examine the source of our guilt instead of focusing solely on what's wrong about your decision, about you taking a stance. We want to focus on what's right. And then we need to understand that exposure decreases resistance. In other words, over time, it will become easier and easier to make these moves, to stand in place and support yourself, your well-being, your children many times, because sometimes we have people that's influencing our families. We're giving them money, we're giving them our time and attention, and we cannot break away from these toxic individuals that's in our lives. But it would allow you to feel confident that you're doing the right thing and making a change. All right, that's it for tonight. We're going to see y'all on next week, God willing. Until then, y'all take care, and thanks for tuning in. All right, take care. Bye-bye. All right, Deb.